Getting to the heart of the matter. Back to Guy, Ben, and Frank with more Inside the News.
Welcome back to our third segment of Inside the News. This is our election trail segment. Frank Vernuccio, Ben Brunson, myself, Guy Wehman. Glad that you are with us. And off the air, some neat things happen. And Frank is he's got a quick wit of his own. You wouldn't believe that being an attorney, because normally they just say, objection here or there. But Frank, kind of start with what you said, and then we'll let Ben dovetail with what he said, because we want to let the people kind of enjoy what happened here with this B-29. Go, Frank.
Well, I'm not a practicing attorney, so therefore I do have a sense of humor. After the Second World War, the Soviets managed to get hold of an American B-29, and they wanted to reverse engineer it to develop it on their own. Well, of course, being a plane that was used in warfare, it had bullet holes in it. The Soviet engineers had no idea what those holes in the plane for, and when they reproduced it, when they reversed engineered it, they decided, well, if the Americans had bullet holes in it or had holes in the fuselage, well, damn, they're going to have it too. And so they put those holes pre-installed bullet holes in their version of the heavy bomber.
Ben, they probably thought it was an aerodynamic thing or something. Go, Ben.
Well, that story is very true. That bomber was forced to land in Vladivostok late in the war after a bomb run over Japan. And it was seized by Stalin, and he ordered his ministers to recreate it bolt by bolt, piece by piece. And they were afraid if they veered in any level, including using standard versus metric type of rivets and bolts, that they'd be executed by Stalin, which they had good reason to fear that, because Stalin did not hesitate to execute people.
Okay, Frank, let's get to our election trail segment. And I've heard some rumblings, and Mark Meadows of the White House says that he's expecting indictments from the Durham report. My fear is that this is going to be delayed until 2021. And if Trump wins, then we're going to see the report. If Trump loses, the report will be buried by the incoming president. What do you think about that, Frank?
Well, on the one hand, the Durham slow going on this thing is simply the work of a methodical prosecutor. This is not a political prosecution like the Russian collusion story was. This is actual criminal criminal investigation, which eventually, hopefully, will turn into criminal prosecution. The problem is, and I think you pointed out perfectly well, Guy, is that if in fact Joe Biden wins in 2020, that prosecution will be squashed. Nothing will ever happen. The Democrat malfeasance will simply be protected. Nothing will ever happen. So most people in the political scene, particularly on the Republican side, are waiting with bated breath to see whether sometime after Labor Day, the Durham report comes out. Indeed, if it does not come out then, the odds are substantial that it might not come out at all. Part of the problem and part of the reason why I believe Durham wants to be so careful about this is that he is mindful of the fact that this will have a substantial impact on the election, and he has to have all his I's dotted and T's crossed.
Ben, people want justice. The American people are saying enough is enough. We saw you go after Flynn. We saw you go after all of these other people. You went after trying to impeach Trump. And yet they just want justice. We didn't see anything coming out of Benghazi. You understand what I'm saying here, Ben, don't you?
Yes. And in fact, I do not expect a Durham report at all. I think Durham's going to speak by indicting people. That's been telegraphed pretty clearly at this point by the DOJ. There will be indictments. The question is when and how far will they follow the evidence. We know the facts at this point. There's no mystery anymore. We know that there was a spying campaign against the Trump campaign. It continued after Trump became president. He was being spied on by the NSA, using these FISA warrants, targeting Carter Page and Papadopoulos. And we've described this and explained this on the air. Once you have a warrant like that, you can go a couple nodes in, which means they could spy on the Trump campaign. We know it was approved out of the White House and that Barack Obama knew all about it. It was not done until he approved it. And we know that John Brennan orchestrated what was necessary to get the FISA warrants, which was going to Christopher Steele and getting this false dossier delivered. And that became the predicate for the FISA warrant. So we know the facts, and it really is a question of whether or not Durham and Barr are brave enough to follow the evidence, or whether they just stop with a couple of low-level indictments against someone like a Peter Strzok. But if they're going to really follow the evidence, they have to indict people like John Brennan and maybe go into the White House itself.
You know, Nancy Pelosi, she is maybe tipped her hand, but she just says, you know, Trump's going to be leaving this White House. He just doesn't know it yet. And that's what she said. Now, I don't know if they're going to try and go for another impeachment here, Frank, but you could tell that they still have their sights on kicking that guy out of that Oval Office.
And there's a reason for that, for the nonsense impeachment. The fact is, the actual issues don't favor the Democrats. What is it they're going to run on?
Yep.
The economy did spectacularly well under President Trump. Foreign affairs, the United States' role in the world has improved considerably under the Trump administration. Blacks are supportive of the Democratic Party have never fared better economically than they have under the Trump administration. When a party completely lacks issues, when there's nothing substantive they can run on, they run on ad hominem attacks. So you don't argue that the Trump economy isn't good. You can't argue that Trump foreign policy isn't good. You run on the fact that Trump's not a nice guy. He's got a rotten personality. We don't like him. He says things that are not polite. And so you got to vote against Trump because he's not a nice guy. He's not the type of guy that you want at your tea party. That's the only issue the Democrats have. And it's been that way since 2016.
You know, Joe Biden, and you know, we talk about this jokes and everything else about, you know, that he can't remember things, but the deep state is taking advantage of him even now. I've never seen anything like this. He's not trying to position himself back to the middle like, say, Clinton would, or most of the other ones after he knows he's going to be the nominee. He's actually shifting more to the left, Ben.
Well, and he's being guided there by his advisors who are reacting to where the Democratic Party is going, which is hard left. And we saw that in New York primaries, and we see open socialists beating classic Democrats. Elliot Engel, 30 years in Congress, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, very powerful congressperson, was defeated in a primary by a large margin. His opponent got 55% of the vote. Jamal Bowman, who is an open socialist, was recruited by a group called the Justice Democrats, which are a bunch of progressive, socialist-leaning liberal Democrats. He defeated Elliot Engel, and now we have a pro-Israeli Elliot Engel out and a very anti-Semitic socialist Jamal Bowman coming into Congress because they'll easily win the election. Even at the state level, Felix Ortiz, very powerful, longtime Brooklyn sub-assemblyman, voted out, lost to an open socialist woman who was recruited to run against him. That was a close one, but that's where the party is moving, and they're pushing Joe Biden, who is a useful idiot at this point, in that direction.
Oh, my goodness. Well, we're rough on the guy, but he's got it all coming to him. We'll be back.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.